What's up, guys? Today we're going to be talking about chord building in A minor. So we're going to be going over a lot of the fundamental stuff. So if we're looking at a piano here, right? There's tons and tons of just lots of notes, but you have to realize that there's only 12 different notes. If we start on C here and count up, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 before we get to the next C. So there's only 12 different notes. When you're writing music, you need to establish something called a key, which is going to dictate which of these notes are actually going to work well together, right? We're not going to use all 12 of these notes every time we're writing music. We have to establish a key first to make sure we're using notes that work together, right? So we're going to be working in A minor because the cool thing about A minor is it only uses the white keys, which makes it a little bit easier because once you start integrating all 12 of these notes, you know, it gets a little trickier. It's really easy to see A minor because you can go right up the white keys. So let's try drawing this in. We got A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then back up to A. So you can see that we didn't have to use any of the black keys, so it's super easy to remember. Just right up the white keys. There you go, and that's an A minor scale, right? So once we make an A minor scale, let's talk about something called a triad. A triad is, if you couldn't guess it, it's a chord made up of 3 notes. It's the most fundamental, basic version of a chord, right? So off of every one of these notes, we can build a triad, and you do that by taking the first note. Oops, double clicked it. Take the first note, you skip one. Take another note, skip another, and you get your third note. So let's build up these triads on top of all of these notes that we already have drawn out, right? We don't need to use the A a second time. So in this case, we're going to take A, we're going to skip one, take C, skip one, and we're going to use E. So let's draw that in. A, C, E. There's our 1 chord. Because we're in the key of A minor, that's our 1. Now let's do our 2 chord. B, skip, D, skip, F, B, D, F. There we go, there's 2 chord. C, skip, E, skip, G, C, E, G. There's our 3 chord. You probably start to see a pattern here, right? D, F. Now remember, even though we ran out of scale here, this just repeats over and over and over. So we just go back to the beginning. D, F, skip, A. D, F, and A. Now remember, this note, even though it's up here instead of down here, it still holds, it serves the same function, even though it's an octave higher, right? Instead of this A, we're using this A, right? So now we'll do E, skip, G, skip, B, E, G, B, right? There we go. F, skip, A, skip, C, F, A, C, G, skip, B, skip, D, G, B, D. And you know what, we'll draw in the 1 chord again, an octave up, just for context, right? So now let's hear how this sounds. These are, we have the same scale is still under here, but now we have triads built on top of every single one of these. So now in the key of A minor, we can look at this and we can see not every combination, but you know, from a basic fundamental standpoint, we can see every chord that we can possibly use in this key when we're writing a song, right? So that's the simplest way to identify what notes you're actually using. In the key of A minor, remember, it's only the white keys, and you can build triads by taking your note, skipping the next one, putting another one, skipping the next one, and putting the next, but to build a triad, right? It's also important to note that that Roman numeral system, right? That I've written. Obviously, when I'm saying it out loud, you can't tell that, you know, it's Roman numeral based. But when you have your 1 chord, your 2 chord, your 3 chord, your 4 chord, your 5 chord, your 6, your 7, that's how we're communicating which chord it is, rather than actually calling it an A minor chord. In this case, I might call it a 1 chord. And the reason that we do that is so that when we're communicating music to each other, it's easier to use that relative system, you know, so that no matter which key we're in, the structure of this is going to stay the same. It's going to be very easy to see. It's going to be very easy to communicate because we're using this relative system instead of a very specific one, right? So let's get rid of all this. I'm going to draw in a quick little chord progression here, right? Let's draw in our 1, let's draw in our 3, let's draw in a 4, and we'll draw in a 6. So remember, we're just kind of working backwards. 1, 7, 6. Boom. Now let's build triads on top of this. So A is going to be A, skip B, C, skip D, E. C is going to be C, skip D, E, skip F, and G. D is going to be D, skip E, F, skip G, A. And down here, we're going to be F, skip G, A, skip B, C, right? Just like that. And here we have a basic chord progression. Now, what you also might want to do is if a piano player were to play this, to make it easier for them, they might try to minimize the range between some of these notes. Like you can see how far this chord and this chord, how far apart they are. And what you can do is, as I was saying before, this F can be moved up here, and this chord is still going to retain the same value because I still have my F, A, C, even though I moved F to another spot. This is called an inversion, but we're not going to talk about that today. You know, let's just keep it basic. But it's important to note that you can do that. You can move these notes around as long as it's the same note. Like this A can be moved down to this A. And see how we're kind of starting to reduce the range between the notes, which would make it a lot easier for a piano player to play. And what that also does is it makes it sound a little more, sometimes kind of putting it out like this can make it sound a little bit more organic, because this is how a piano player might play it for real, you know? So rather than having all these chords jumping around, it kind of makes it sound like you just drew it in, you know what I mean? But this is how it adds a little bit of texture, and this is how a piano player might actually play this. So it makes it sound a little bit more genuine. Now, it's also important to note that you don't always have to do 1 chord per bar like this. You know, the same way that we are talking about rhythm in our past lessons, we can turn on this metronome and create chords that may not follow this, you know, this 1 bar pattern all the time. Like we might do that, add a little bit of flavor, right? So it doesn't always have to be 1 chord per bar. And these chords don't always have to sit right at the beginning of each bar, right? And it's important to just experiment, find chord progressions that you like and try using, you know, different combinations of these chords, because they all serve a very different function. You know, like the 1 chord is always going to kind of sound like your anchor. That's going to give you the most resolution. You know, the 2 chord in minor is the only diminished chord naturally that happens within your key. So, you know, all of these chords do have different characteristics. So it's important to kind of try them out and experiment with making your own chord progressions and stuff like that. So yeah, in the next lesson, we're going to talk a little bit more about the application of this. So you can head on over there when you're ready.